All right. Welcome to Parallax Lectures. I'm your host, Thomas Mark. We're doing at Parallax some new podcasts and lectures where we interview or where we give people space to expound on their ideas and have a discussion and a dialogue with participants and with people interested in new ways of sense making. You can visit our website www.parallax_magazine.de. You can find there a tab with upcoming events where you can see what will happen in the near future. Today, our guest who will be providing a lecture is John Bunzl. John Bunzl is a businessman and a political activist and an author who wrote a book about Simpol. That's a campaign he created for alternative ways of, forcing politicians to deal with global problems on a more broader scale. And so I'm very happy that John took the time to be here on this program. John, are you there?
I'm here, Tom. Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you everybody who's here for listening in. Yeah, I hope that what I have to offer you this evening will be interesting. So I just have a PowerPoint which I'm going to.
Right. Give us just a sec. So you are before you start, John. So,
yeah, sure.
So where are you calling from? Where are you living?
Oh, sorry.
Right
Well, I'm based in London, in the UK.
Right.
And yeah, the Simpol campaign. In fact, I was initiated in about the year 2000. So it's actually about 20 years old.
Oh, right. Okay.
But it's actually growing and becoming more and more relevant as time goes on.
Right.
And so, yes, hopefully, as I say, it'll be of interest. Was there anything more you wanted to ask before?
No, I just, no, you can just go ahead. You have your floor now, your time, your stage. I'm looking forward to that. Right. So you have the stage now.
Okay. Can you see that title screen?
Yes.
Okay. So, yes, what I thought I would title it, Why the Nation-State System is a Block to Humanity's Further Evolution and How We Can Transcend It. And I chose that title because I think we underestimate the extent to which the nation-state system influences us. And I just thought to start off to try to bring that home to us, I put up a few little pictures about that evoke what the nation means to us, both in terms of our pride for our nation, but also our shame on occasion as well. And it just seemed to me that these pictures kind of evoke that. And I think if you relate that to your own country, you can start to feel just culturally or internally how much our nation means to each of us. And there's also shame, British and ashamed. I mean, for those who are Brexiteers, it would be British and proud would be on the previous slide. But for those who didn't want to leave the European Union, they maybe feel quite ashamed. And then, of course, if you lose the World Cup, that's also quite shameful. That was the Indian National Shame Day for the way that women are treated in India. And then I think this picture was a very powerful one. This was German Chancellor Willy Brandt I think it was in about 1970, who knelt down at the Holocaust memorial for the first time, which I think at that time, relatively soon after the Second World War, was a very powerful thing for him to do. So I just want to convey that we see the world through national glasses, and we tend to not even be aware of the extent to which we do so. And that's important if we are going to realize just what a block the nation-state system is. But before I go on, I just want to set the nation-state system in an evolutionary context. Because if you look back through the whole of human evolution, and you look at the units of governance, we started off with governance units being hunter-gatherer bands or hunter-gatherer bands or tribes. And then we moved to larger city-states or villages and city-states. And then we moved to still larger nation-states. I don't quite know why I've got the Norwegian flag here, but anyway. So there's been this progression to ever larger scales of governance. And it's useful to understand what drives that process. And that process is actually new technology. So when hunter-gatherers and tribes discovered the technology of farming, what this created is what I call a new context for governance. The old context of the tribal elders or the shaman leading the band or the tribe was no longer appropriate when farming was invented, because farming meant that food could be gathered and stored in much greater quantity, and that meant that forms of administration and ownership and legal systems and so forth had to be developed. So the context for governance changed as a result of the new technology of farming. And that, of course, then in turn led to larger settled communities and eventually to middle-age city-states and small states. And then in the late Middle Ages, or the Middle Ages, you had industrial technology beginning to come on the scene, like the printing press. And the printing press, for example, also created a new context for governance, because the then existing context for governance was effectively in Europe the Catholic Church. But the invention of printing sort of democratized knowledge and took it away from the monopoly that the Catholic Church had and distributed it more democratically. And that meant that the church lost its grip. And eventually, this new context for governance that was created by printing and other industrial technologies meant that the governance itself had to move up to a still larger, more encompassing level, and that was the nation state. And that the nation state system, you could say, started with the Treaty of, or the Peace of Westphalia, which was, I think, in 1648. So for the last few hundred years since then, we've been inculcated with this whole idea of the nation. But of course, evolution and the evolution of technology hasn't stopped with the industrial era, and we're now in the information age with computers, the internet, and so on. And that has now created another new context for governance, which we are today struggling with, because our system of governance is still national, but the context for governance has gone global. And as I will explain, that will require some kind of global cooperative governance system. And that is what I will be talking about later. How do we get there? So that's just to give a little bit of evolutionary context. But let's look a little bit more closely at today's new global context for governance. And I just want to look into a little bit sort of more with a pinpoint to sort of just pinpoint the key dynamic that's going on. So I'm just going to ask you a question. What happens when nations need capital for their economies to thrive, and capital is no longer nationally contained, but moves globally? Well, there is only one possible consequence of that, and that is that nations are forced to compete with each other to attract capital, investment and jobs. So that is an inevitable consequence of national governance on the one side and a global economy on the other. And that competition is being played out every day. So how do countries compete to attract capital, investment and jobs? Well, it's not that difficult. If each country has got to keep its business taxes relatively low so that its businesses and industries can stay competitive with those elsewhere. It has to keep rich people's taxes relatively low to stop them moving elsewhere. It has to keep environmental regulations relatively low, or at least not significantly higher than in other countries, so that the costs involved won't make that nation's industries less competitive. And it also has to allow immigration relatively in order to keep labor costs low, to keep the country attractive to multinational corporations who, of course, want cheap labor. So the point I want to make is that from the point of view of an individual government, attracting capital, investment and jobs by doing these things is seen as a good thing. This will make our country more competitive. It will attract more investment and jobs, and that will mean we'll have more money to spend on public services and so forth. But that's a nation-centric assumption. That's the assumption, or that's the conclusion you would reach if you are just looking purely through your own national glasses. But what happens when you look world-centrically, when you step back and you see all nation states playing the same competition game, you realize that they are all stuck in a vicious circle, which I call destructive global competition. And the real problem with destructive global competition is the consequence that it has for solving global problems like climate change and many, many other issues. Because to solve climate change, for example, every nation has to increase environmental standards, and increasing those standards means increasing the costs of its industries. So if you're telling your industries you've got to stop emitting carbon, that of course means they've got to put in more expensive equipment or carbon capture or other technologies. That's going to cost them more money, and that risks making them uncompetitive with their competitors in other countries who may not be implementing the same measures. And so I think this dynamic is quite well expressed in this little cartoon image here, where you've got basically any country that wins the race of solving global problems actually ends up harming its economy, cutting its own economic throat. And that's why nobody's moving. And of course, the guy wearing the little number 2, another country has got his finger in his mouth. He's saying, "God, well, I don't want to ruin my economy either." And so this is why we have global problems like climate change just sort of really going out of control, but government action lagging far, far behind. And why we have all these agreements, and whether it's the Paris Climate Agreement or whether it's efforts at the UN COP process, where a lot of fine words are spoken, but there's very little action. And so it's the real problem that we're facing is this destructive global competition dynamic, which is a vicious circle, and which is a direct consequence of the nation-state system matched with global capital, an economy that's global, and that mismatch causes DGC, causes destructive global competition, and means that we can't solve all of these problems that we're now facing. So DGC, as I'll call it for short, is a higher, more complete, world-centric analysis of what's going on. So you can see that, we've got to move or expand our glasses from just being national glasses to, nation-centric glasses to being world-centric glasses. And if you look carefully in the newspapers, you can see examples of DGC in action. Here's a clip from the Financial Times. Governments remain reluctant to address this threat because any country acting alone to curb its greenhouse gas emissions without similar commitments by other governments risks damaging the competitiveness of its industries. So what I'm trying to, and that's just an example related to climate change. You can find other examples relating to all sorts of other global issues. So DGC is the problem that we need to solve if we're going to solve any of these global challenges that are facing us. And there are many. I mean, the climate change is one. There's how do nations cooperate to prevent or mitigate the problems of pandemics like COVID. There's extreme wealth inequality. Now, you can't start taxing the rich to redistribute to the poor because unless you do it, unless you cooperate globally, because the rich will just, or the corporations will just move their operations somewhere else. So wealth inequality is another global issue. Mass migration and the erosion of national identities is another one. Re-regulation of financial markets, tax competition and tax avoidance, nuclear disarmament, the list goes on. Even space governance. Someone wrote to me the other day, that's why I've added it to this list. There's so much junk up in space now that it's actually becoming quite dangerous to send satellites up because there is no cooperative governance of space yet. And I mean, the internet is another possible area as well. So the more global the world becomes, the more these global problems are arising, but they can't be dealt with by the nation-state system. But actually more important, well, or just as important, and what few people see are the political consequences of DGC. So, like I say, every government, regardless of the party in power, must keep its economy internationally competitive. Okay, now, regardless of the party in power, right? This is important because it doesn't, we still think that if we vote for this party or that, we will get dramatically different policies. But once a party gets into government, it's got to keep that country's economy internationally competitive. And that means that the range of policies that it can adopt are extremely narrow. So this is something I think many of you will recognize. As I say, this DGC is a vicious circle, and it kind of enforces this neoliberal or near-neoliberal political monoculture. And the result, of course, is that when people see that it doesn't make that much difference whether they vote one way or another way, they feel that the political system just doesn't work anymore. And that's what I call pseudo-democracy. So it's sort of like, I think in the old days when Henry Ford first made his Model T Ford, I think that the salesman had to say, well, you can have any color you like so long as it's black, because they only had the one color. And it's a little bit the same with politics today. It doesn't matter who you vote for. By and large, you end up getting the same competitiveness-oriented policies, and that is because of DGC. And I think, so what we're facing now is what the philosopher Jürgen Habermas calls a legitimation crisis, where the existing governance system no longer commands people's allegiance. And I think you're seeing this, I'm sure you would agree. And this is also why the political center, the center-right, center-left area of politics is no longer viable, because people have given up on it and they've moved to the extreme right or the more extreme left. Increased political polarization and a backlash against globalization. And this isn't just happening in one country, it's happening transnationally. Why? Because it's the consequence of destructive global competition. It's a global phenomenon that is driving this. You know, and solutions are no longer to be found at the national level. So this is, you know, that's why it's happening everywhere at the same, pretty much at the same time, or at least across the West. You know, Brexit, Trump, the AfD in Germany, the Front National in France. You know, the right is on the march across countries, not just within one or two individual countries. I'd just like to insert a sort of quick comment about what I put here, postmodern global justice. What I mean by that is the broad approach taken by NGOs and campaign groups around the world, who I would broadly suggest have a more a postmodern or in spiral dynamics or an integral theory, a green level of development. Now, the problem for most of them is that the postmodern denial of hierarchy means that they tend to see all global problems as being on the same level, or they will, you know, so they don't see destructive global competition as a priority, as a primary issue that needs to be dealt with, if they see it at all. So the postmodern denial of hierarchy tends to mean that, oh, well, you know, you've got climate activists over here, and you've got, people campaigning about tax avoidance over there, and it's just a mishmash. It's a huge kind of disorganized mosaic of thousands of NGOs all sort of ploughing their own particular furrow, and they're all missing because they are only at a postmodern level of thinking. They're missing destructive global competition. They're missing, they're not world-centric in their thinking. And you sometimes hear this said, where you'll often hear them say, oh, well, there are no single solutions. Okay, which in a subtle kind of way means, well, you take your solution, I'll take my solution, we won't really cooperate. You go your way and I'll go mine. And so there is no coherence in the movement as a result. And as a result of failing to see destructive global competition as the primary issue, they tend to focus, of course, on blaming and shaming individual governments and corporations. And that, of course, as we know, is just not getting, you know, it's sort of delaying bad stuff, but it's not really solving anything. And I would have to also make a comment for those of us who feel we're at an integral level of consciousness, or turquoise or yellow or turquoise in spiral dynamics. In my experience, I tend to find that the integralists tend to be a little bit over-focused on personal development and not interested enough in civics, politics, and economics. So I just throw that out there. So what are our initial conclusions from what we've covered so far? DGC means that policies to save the planet are incompatible with staying competitive. You can't keep your country competitive and solve global problems. The two just are incompatible. So it's not that politicians don't want to solve climate change and other global problems. Destructive global competition means that they can't solve them. Okay, now that's really important to understand. We like to think of our politicians as being in power, but their power is actually incredibly limited, especially when it comes to global problems. And it also means that protest and petitions, the usual standard NGO methodologies for dealing with problems or combating problems, just simply won't work. So our consciousness needs to evolve from a nation-centric level to a much broader, higher world-centric level, and so do our actions. And since governments can't act, only we citizens can. So this is why understanding why the nation-state system and destructive global competition, understanding them is so important, because if we don't understand that, I don't think we will solve global problems at all. However, in thinking about how we do approach it, we've got some constraints that we have to recognize that result from what we have covered so far. So we have to deal with DGC, but there's no point in trying to create a world government, and neither do we actually need one, as I will explain later. We also have to do it without relying on existing global institutions like the United Nations or the World Trade Organization, the World Bank, the IMF. Why? Because if you look into it a little bit more carefully, you'll see that those institutions are subtly controlled by the most powerful nation states. They were, after all, created by those nation states. So there is no way that nation states will relinquish their autonomy to these global bodies. So we have to find a way of doing it without them. But we also have to do it through existing national political systems, because they are the locus of political action and power. If we tried to set up some kind of parallel opposing system, what you would find is that new system would just compete with the existing system, and you're just inviting more conflict. That's not transformation, that's just conflict. So we have to transform through the existing national political systems. But we also have to do so without being a political party. Why? Because as we just saw earlier, all political parties have to keep their national economies competitive. And so they're all stuck in that constraint. So there's no point in trying to create a global political party or a global party that has branches in every country, because that would just put you in the same mess that existing political parties find themselves. So that's not an option. And we citizens need to drive the process. And we need to do so in a way that aligns national self-interests with the global common interest. So in short, we need to transcend and include the nation-state system. So how do we do that? Okay, so now we move on to the simultaneous policy itself, which, I would suggest is, I'm not saying it's the only way this can be done, but I'm suggesting this is perhaps one way that can be done that is actually looking already quite promising. So there are 3 P's I'd like to talk about with Simpol. There's the policy, the pledge, and the process. So it's those 3 P's. So we'll start with the policy. Excuse me. So what is Simpol as a policy? It's a range of policies to be implemented by all or sufficient nations simultaneously. Why simultaneously? Because only with simultaneous action across all or sufficient nations at the same time can you actually break the vicious circle of destructive global competition. If all nations or sufficient nations act together, destructive global competition is eliminated, and then nations can actually implement the agreement without fear of nations or banks or the rich moving their operations elsewhere. And it will contain only policies that nations can't implement alone. So policies that nations can implement alone, well, that's within the national context, and we don't need to worry about that. Nations can do that on their own. But it's those policies, the Simpol contains only those policies that nations can't implement alone, like, an 80% reduction in carbon emissions, and these really dramatic steps that we need to take to combat global problems. So Simpol only deals with the global level. Also, its policies are not, one thing that I think scares people about a simultaneous policy is, oh my God, this is a one-size-fits-all, everyone having to do the same thing. No, what we're talking about is policies that are graduated. So a little bit like within a national context, you might have, for example, an income tax. Income tax that the poor will pay nothing or less, and the rich will pay much more, or at least that's the idea. So there's a graduated approach, and you would follow the same principle globally, where some nations might have higher taxes or restrictions and others a bit lower, but the point is that it's agreed and that it's implemented simultaneously. Also, Simpol would cover multiple issues. One of the reasons the UN process is failing is because it typically deals with just one issue at a time, such as carbon emissions. But if you take almost any single issue, there will always be some nations that win, others that lose, and of course then the losers have no incentive to cooperate. So with climate change, for example, the US is probably the biggest, and China are the biggest emitters on the planet. They would have the highest costs to reduce their emissions, and therefore there is no incentive for them to cooperate. But with Simpol, what we're talking about is a multi-issue framework. The idea being that you would combine two or more complementary policies together so that what a nation might lose on one policy, it can gain on the other. So, for example, you might have a combined climate and global tax policy, or those two issues together, so that the revenues that are raised from the global tax on multinationals such as Amazon could then be redistributed to nations according to the costs that they are going to incur in reducing their emissions. And in that way, you make action potentially at least, in every nation's interests. So a multi-issue framework is really important. The other thing that Simpol would be detailed, agreed policies, not targets. Because again, another of the problems we see with the United Nations process is, well, we'll all agree to, a target to reduce emissions to 2 degrees or 1 degree, whatever it may be. But the problem with targets is that each nation has no idea what its competitor nations are going to do to actually achieve that target. And so, of course, the culture of suspicion and uncertainty remains with targets. And of course, the net result is nothing much happens because nobody wants to take the risk. But if we have negotiations which are about detailed policies, every country will know what every other country is going to do, and that should reduce the risk and make action much more likely. Now, we're not talking about solving all global problems on one day simultaneously. That would be crazy. What we're talking about is a series of multi-issue policy packages. So you might have the first package in year 1, another package in year 3, another package in year 5, and so forth. So we're talking about a kind of rolling process of multi-issue packages. And at least in democratic countries, these policies would be designed or strongly influenced by citizens. And I'll explain that a bit more later. And negotiations to actually hammer out the simultaneous policies would only happen once sufficient governments had signed the Simpol Pledge. So that brings me to the second P, which is the pledge. So what is the pledge? So this is like a one-page document, but in essence, what does it say? It says, I pledge to implement, this is for governments, I pledge to implement the simultaneous policy only if all or sufficient nations have also signed it and if the policy content of Simpol has been agreed. Okay, so that is essentially what the pledge says. And it's to be signed by members of parliament or senators, by political parties, and by governments. And as you can see, it's only a pledge in principle. So it's really no risk to sign it for any politician. And that's important because it starts to build international trust and confidence. It starts to bring all nations into the room, because there's no way you're going to get global policies agreed if you don't get everybody into the room. And it's, in a sense, when a politician or a government or a political party signs the pledge, they are declaring themselves ready. They're saying, I will if you will. I'm ready to negotiate the simultaneous policy and implement it alongside you. You know, I'm ready to go. So it's a kind of challenge. I will if you will. So I think that's an important dynamic that that will sort of get the ball rolling. So finally, the final P of the 3 Ps, the process. This is actually the interesting part. I hope you're all still awake. So it's very simple, because the process simply works by citizens signing on to the campaign, which is what I would invite you to do today. And what you do by signing on is you're basically telling your political representatives that you'll be giving strong voting preference at all future national elections to politicians or parties who've signed the pledge. So it doesn't mean you, if a politician signs the pledge, it doesn't mean you have to vote for them. All it is saying to politicians is, I'm not really particularly interested in all of your other policies. I'm going to be giving strong preference to politicians that have signed the pledge, to the probable exclusion of those who haven't. And so that simple statement actually turbocharges competition between politicians, because, as I think you'll appreciate, and as we saw with the US election just the other day, national elections are being won and lost on relatively fine margins. And so it won't take relatively many citizens to be saying, I'm going to be more likely to vote for politicians that have signed the pledge. It doesn't take many of citizens saying that for it to be in the interest of both sides to sign the pledge. And in fact, we'll see that is actually happening. And this creates a powerful domino effect, which I'll demonstrate to you later. So what often happens in elections, particularly as we've had it in the UK, is that when one candidate signs up, the others are forced to follow. And we quite, particularly in tightly contested electoral seats, we find that it doesn't take, it could even be as little as one voter saying this, and you end up with all of the candidates having signed the pledge before the election has even taken place. So whoever wins, Simpol wins another member of parliament. So as I'm explaining, Simpol doesn't need a majority. It just needs the critical number of citizens to make it in the interests of the major contenders to sign the pledge. And if you think about it from the point of view of a politician, signing the pledge is a win-win-lose. So if I sign it as a politician, I win because I make myself more attractive to the citizens who support Simpol. So I have the potential of gaining more votes. It's another win for me because I don't actually have to implement Simpol until all or sufficient nations are on board. But it's a lose for me if I don't sign and my competitor does, right? So it's a very powerful proposition. Now you may be thinking, yeah, politicians will do anything to get your vote prior to an election. But then after the election, they'll just cancel it. But think about it. Simpol only gets implemented when all the sufficient nations are on board. And so until that point arrives, there is absolutely no point in a politician cancelling their pledge. If they did, they're only turning round to the voters and saying, please don't vote, please don't ever vote for me again. You know, so cancelling their pledge once they've made it makes absolutely no sense at all. And indeed, no politician ever has, at least not so far. And obviously, this process I've been describing can only work in democratic countries. However, the idea is that we get Simpol rolling in democratic countries first, and then non-democratic countries can voluntarily join the process later on down the line. Now, let me just come back to the domino effect. What you can see on the screen here is a screenshot from our old UK website, which was this was during the election in 2017. And what you can see here is the Vale of Clwyd, which is a very tightly contested electoral constituency in Wales. And you can see here that on the 14th of May, this was, I think, about, I don't know, a week or two before it was actually a few days before the election. The election, I think, was on the 21st of May. So on the 14th of May, the Liberal Democrat candidate signed the pledge, Gwyn Williams. And then we send a nice little email to his competitors, Chris Ruane and James Davies, and we say, well, did you know that one of your competitors has signed the pledge? Why put yourself at a competitive disadvantage? And then, sure enough, a few days later, Chris Ruane, the Labour candidate, signed the pledge. And then this, on the 20th of May, which was the night before the election, the sitting Conservative MP finally cracked and signed up as well. Why? Because he had no choice. And we never tell politicians exactly how many supporters we have in their area, so we keep them guessing. So you can see, and this domino effect that I've just said, this has happened multiple times, and it can happen with Simpol having only very relatively few supporters in those areas. So this is the power. So what have our results been so far? So in the UK, the last UK election, which was the end of last year, we got over 700 candidates to sign the pledge, and that was from right across the party political spectrum, mostly on the left and centre left, but also some Conservatives as well. In the last election in Ireland, that was in 2017, 53 candidates signed, and 11 of those are now members of the Irish Dáil, TDs as they call themselves. In the UK, I didn't say, we had 700 candidates plus candidates sign the pledge, and of those, we now have 100 members of Parliament who have pledged to implement Simpol. That's about 15, 16, 17% of MPs. In Germany, in 2017, we got 50 candidates to sign, and 11 of those are now members of the Deutsche Bundestag. And we also have a few MPs in the European Parliament, Australia, in Denmark, Luxembourg, and Argentina. So the process is beginning to roll out across democratic countries. But the point I really want to make here is that Simpol puts us citizens in control. We can actually use the domino effect and the power of our votes to drive, to make the politicians compete for what we want them to do, not having to choose solely between their manifestos. We turn the tables and get them to do what we want them to do. So what about non-democratic nations? Because what I've said is all very well for democratic countries, but what about non-democratic countries? Well, a lot of this depends on what else happens. So Simpol is making progress, but I think what it depends on is how successful or unsuccessful the other alternatives like the United Nations process are. If the United Nations process continues to fail, then I think Simpol will move higher and higher up the global agenda to the point where non-democratic nations will see it as the only game in town. Because after all, they need solutions to global problems too. It's not just us, they are affected as well. And Simpol's win-win framework, it's simultaneous implementation, multi-issue, win-win policy packages, means that no country has anything to lose by joining the process and everything to gain. Because, as I said, Simpol aligns national interests with the global common interest. And also, I think in particular, poorer nations would have a lot to gain, because right now, poor countries usually are having to borrow money from the IMF at huge rates of interest. Under Simpol, you could redistribute those. You could redistribute global tax revenues to those countries on a debt-free basis. So poorer countries would have a lot to gain, I think, in principle. The other thing I think is that, particularly if we're looking at more what we call rogue nations or highly suspicious nations, the important thing about Simpol is Simpol doesn't come from another nation state. It's not a proposal made by Britain or by Germany. It comes from citizens. So it comes from a neutral third position. And I think that's important. But if rogue nations, some nations were to refuse to join the process, they could, I think, be isolated. So if enough other nations were ready to implement Simpol, but there were just a few that threatened to undermine the agreement, measures could be implemented to ensure that those rogue nations couldn't undermine the agreement. Now, all of this, I'm sure, might sound a little bit utopian to you, but how does evolution work? Deepening crisis increases the incentive for cooperation. Evolution works through crisis. Cooperation happens only when the water gets up to here. So you have to see the whole process that I've outlined with Simpol against that sort of evolutionary backdrop, if you see what I mean. There's lots and lots of questions that I'm sure you'll have, which are more detailed. I mean, we'll hopefully cover quite a few of them in a minute. But if you want a full rundown, if you go onto the policy page of our website, you will find a link to something called the information pack, and that will give you much fuller details. Now, the other thing I want to come back to now is the political polarization that we're seeing across the world. And just very broadly, if you look at what are people on the left asking for and what are people on the right asking for, I've just made a little list here for each. And I want to explain to you how something like Simpol or how global cooperation would actually transcend and include and reconcile those two, right and left. So what does the left want? Well, the left wants environmental sustainability. Well, if you have Simpol is implemented, you will solve, you will effectively internalize the externalities, because global governance and simultaneous implementation of these policies will solve climate change and these other global environmental problems. So the left gets what it wants there. However, remember that implementation is simultaneous, and therefore no nation's economic competitiveness would suffer because all nations are moving together. And that's a key demand of the right. So that's satisfied. If you have governments able to tax the rich and the multinationals properly and can redistribute wealth not just within nations but across nations, there will be less wealth inequality. That's a key demand of people on the left. And as a result of that, if people in poorer countries can make a decent living in their home country, they won't feel a need to migrate. That will reduce immigration and mass migration, a key demand of the right. that will in turn secure national and cultural identities much more. It'll mean that people can still travel, but it won't mean that they're forced to migrate as they are now, as a result of our win-lose, unbalanced global economy. And with governments able to tax the rich properly, public services and good social safety nets can be restored. And of course, everybody wants peace and security. So what I'm trying to convey to you is that the solution to the extreme polarization that we see all across the world, and in particular across the West today, will only be resolved if we, not at the national level, but only if we go up to cooperate at the global level. So just before I wrap up, let's very quickly, I just want to return to an evolutionary perspective. In a sense, what we're seeing with globalization is nothing new. If you look into evolutionary biology, you'll see that before we had the cells of which we are all made of, the nucleated cell, there were, before the nucleated cells used to be protocells. Protocells were cells which contained all sorts of competing organisms, and for billions of years, they competed themselves to death, or they were invaded by organisms from other cells and were eaten, their insides were eaten, and they were destroyed. Until one entity within one of those cells, in fact, what is now known as the nucleus, managed to orchestrate cooperation within the cell. And that was the birth of the nucleated cell. So in a sense, that story is a little bit like, on the nano sort of cellular scale, is a little bit like the globe, the Earth today, where we've got all these nation states and corporations competing with each other and risking competing ourselves to death. And so in a sense, globalization is nothing new. It's happened before. And it was solved through cooperation, probably simultaneous, I would suggest, of the nucleus being able to orchestrate cooperation within the cell. So, and that's why actually a number of evolutionary biologists are very interested in Simpol, because it sort of mimics the way that evolution has overcome competition bottlenecks throughout evolution. And in fact, we actually, on our YouTube channel, we've got a series of interviews, and we've got one with John Stewart, the evolutionary biologist, and we've also got another one coming up with David Sloan Wilson. So I would ask you to check those out. I think you'll find them interesting. So we've gone from protocells to nucleated cells to multicelled organisms, to societies of multicelled organisms like us, to bands, to tribes, to middle-aged small states, to nation states. And now we're at the next level. Destructive global competition is the next hurdle that we have to overcome. And like I said, competition drives cooperation. That's the paradox. Competition is very necessary. It's good for innovation, for progress, but eventually the space for fruitful competition runs out, and then you get into a bottleneck like we're seeing now, and that drives. It can drive us down to chaos, but it can also drive us up to a new level of cooperation, and that's what Simpol. That's the pathway that Simpol is trying to offer us. So that's, as I said, families, tribes, small states, nation states, and now the global cooperation is the next step. And David Sloan Wilson in particular talks about multi-level selection theory, and Simpol follows that, is very congruent with that theory. But also evolutionarily, we've gone from genetic evolution, which was a blind sort of trial and error process, to cultural evolution, which was a new step up, where we could actually pass cultural information on by writing and language and storytelling. But now we're at a stage where evolution's got to take another step up to conscious evolution, where we actually can look back, we start to look back at evolution, see how it's overcome the bottlenecks, competition bottlenecks of the past, and we start to consciously say, now we can see where evolution is wanting us to go. And we can start to direct, to take ourselves intentionally down that path. So that is the path that Simpol is trying to, that Simpol offers us. And just before we finish up, I'm nearly done. Just one or two quotes, which just to back up, Arthur Koestler was the guy who actually came up with the whole theory of holons and holarchies, which was later expanded by Ken Wilber in his 20 Tenets. Arthur Koestler actually said, evolutionary progress requires simultaneous, coordinated changes of all the relevant components in the structure and function of the organic holarchy. Okay, so he recognized that simultaneous implementation was absolutely key at certain critical junctures. And David Sloan Wilson is commenting on my book, the Simpol Solution. It's a pleasure to read a book that captures the modern evolutionary worldview so well, and your actual solution is very clever. We even share an awareness of the need for a psychological therapeutic process and a global policy-making process. Yeah, what he means by the psychological therapeutic process is what is covered in our book, the Simpol Solution, which is how do we move from nation-centric worldview to a world-centric worldview. And Ken Wilber also commented on Simpol. Central idea of Simpol is very powerful. That is the notion of how to link votes in one country with votes in another, how to link political action in one country with action in another. International competition is built into the nation-state system at its current level of development. And so the issue is not environmental concerns, but how to get humans to agree on environmental concerns. This is really fascinating, very hopeful. In my opinion, this is a crucial issue for the 21st century. And like I said, the book, The Simpol Solution, it's out in English. Tom Amark's Phänomen Verlag has the German version, which is called Nationales Denken, Globale Krise. And there is a US edition, and there is also a Dutch edition as well. So I would, if you want to find out more, that's a good place to go. And finally, I would just ask you, please, to sign on. It just takes a couple of minutes, completely free of charge. Just go to simpol.org and sign up. And there's more there as well to have a look. So thank you for listening to that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I think Tom is going to be the master of ceremonies for questions. Is that right, Tom?
Right. Thank you, John, for that very interesting presentation. That was very well structured and clear. I think, would everybody please put their cameras on so we can have like an open conversation now? You know, I saw that, John, after we spoke last, that there was like quite the development in terms of how many candidates and politicians signed up to that pledge. You know, it's like what I was thinking about, like the Nordic countries. I saw that Denmark is represented somewhat, but what about like Sweden and Norway and you know, Finland? Yeah. Is there?
Well, yeah. I mean, the problem really there is we haven't yet found anyone ready to actually represent us and sort of push the campaign in those countries yet. So if you know anyone from Norway or Sweden or Finland who might be interested in Simpol, then please, you know, and who might have a little bit of time to devote to this.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You know, put them in touch. So that is actually how we're operating, Tom, is, you know, people, you know, if they're interested in the idea, they contact me or they contact us, and, you know, I let them know what's involved. We've got a kind of coordination group of about 10 of us in different countries around the world. And we have a Zoom meeting about every 2 or 3 weeks. And we're focusing on getting support from politicians. Because actually what we've found is that, sadly, citizens are a bit slow to understand all of this, which is kind of understandable. Right. But politicians are much more ready to understand it. Why? I think because they are more directly on the horns of the competitiveness dilemma. They understand the problem because they're dealing with it every day.
Right.
And so, quite often, we get politicians who sign up and they give us a comment, and they're not just signing up just because it might get them more votes. They're signing up because they really think it's a really good idea. They really appreciate it. They say, oh, thank you. At last, we've got something that can get us out of this mess.
Right. So because there's so much talk about the Nordic countries and the secret of the Nordic countries, and how advanced they are in terms of social policies. And so I thought maybe that could jolt the system up a little bit if we have a representative there.
Yes, Tom, but there's some things that Britain is ahead of. No, we'd love some supporters in the Nordic countries to get on board and help us, get up to speed there as well.
Right, perfect. So, does anybody have questions from the audience?
Yes, me.
Please go ahead.
I was thinking about Simpol and how to leverage Simpol's influence and how to speed up the process a lot the last 2 years, and was thinking about what the basic problem is. And I think one idea might be that we focus on the wrong target audience. We focus mainly on people exiting green meme. And since Simpol is something like yellow or teal or something like that, there is an inherent conflict between these two value memes. And I was thinking of how could we get together with people from the orange meme, like people in high places with lots of money, like investors agenda people or something like that, and was thinking what we could sell them and offer them in a way. And that might be that since Biden won the election, climate change is really an issue now in the US, and lots of people who are into the stock market and everything, they are seeing that regulations are coming towards them, and it's in their best interest for their businesses that these regulations will get in place simultaneously all over the globe, and that is what we can sell them. And so my question is, I know your policy, John, that you always say, no, we can't sell Simpol, we can't, it must be completely independent. But would you be interested in a tactic to get the orange meme on board and try to sell them these ideas?
Yeah, definitely, Yves. When I say we need to be independent, we need to be politically independent. In other words, we can't accept funding from for-profit organizations, but we're very happy to accept funds from private individuals. So if you know any rich orange memers, we'll be delighted to take their money. But no, you're right. I think the reinsurance industry, for example, ought to be very interested. And I think, I don't think it's actually an accident. My background is business. And I think the reason I came up with Simpol is partly because of my business background and having some knowledge of the way the global economy works. And so I do agree with you. I think concerned orange memers, ought to be relatively interested. So I think we could approach. I would love to speak to key business people
Me too. Yeah.
Or to the reinsurance industry, who after all are going to have to pay for all the disasters.
I would even cut my hair for that. I would even cut my hair again for that.
Yeah, well, you should do that anyway, mate. But no, so I agree with you. I think we should. Our problem is time, and
Yeah.
It's we need people who know people in those companies, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So you basically agree that the Simpol might also be turned into like a product that we can sell, like with normal marketing, to businesses that are interested in getting the regulations in place simultaneously over the globe.
Eve, if you go onto our website on the Join with Simpol page, and if you click support Simpol as a business, there's a download there, which is a kind of business briefing, which is like a two-page document, which basically tells businesses why they should be. It's in their interest to be supporting Simpol. So that if you download that could give you a starting point.
And from that starting point on, is there more material with which I can work out a strategy?
You need to talk to me separately, I think, because we haven't really explored that, simply because there aren't enough of us and we don't have any real funding, apart from my own.
Yeah, I would like to solve that. That is because that is the bottleneck, I think.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, no. That would be. Let's talk afterwards, Eve, because I agree with you. We need to solve that problem.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Somebody else who has a question right now? Alison, you have to put on your microphone, I think, if you...
Can you hear me now? Yes.
Yes.
Hi. Sorry.
Hi.
Wanted to add something to Eve's very important point. I know John quite well, and I think it is a challenge to jumpstart something that is so timely when there is such a plethora and a bombardment of information and news feeds and things happening. And one of the things that I had wanted, but again, I'm involved in things independent of Simpol, is to get a marketing agency on board. And that's why, Eve, John knows that a few years ago, we had been on the cusp of getting a very high-powered Washington, D.C. Marketing company to back Simpol. And it was almost kind of a verging miracle moment that didn't quite take for various reasons, some of which I don't even understand. But that would have been the precipice really for jumping off, because we'll be able to do independently all our great efforts. I mean, I met John Kerry even, who is now in a wonderful position. And he was interested in those brief moments that I had with him and talked to him about Simpol and gave him the book. And I have the feeling that he did register something. But, for all these independent individual moments that all of us will find, through our various means, there's nothing like having the propulsion of a bona fide agency. I don't care where in the world it is, although my feeling was the US. And Eve, that's why I wanted to, jump off of your very important point and bring that back to you, John. I don't know yet who and how, but boy, is the soil is fertile right now.
If we can find a good agency that is willing to work pro bono, for free or for very, very low cost, then that would be terrific. But you see, we also need funding anyhow, because we're going to need to do social media marketing, and we're going to need to do all of the usual things, and that's going to cost money. And I think we maybe also need to research, the top rich people around the world, find out which ones are sort of susceptible to global problems, and have a good intentions, and then try and write to them directly, care of their companies or whatever. And, you know, so, I mean, that's another project. But again, you know, what we need is people who can kind of take hold of these, take charge of these projects, because we're just too few of us to do everything.
May I just pivot off of that one point that John made, and then I'll just to say that, yes, I completely agree. And I think that you and I had a conversation last year, even where you had mentioned perhaps focusing on previous leaders of nations. I know that I forgot the name of that organization of past presidents of the United States, because boy, would they like to lend their voice in something where maybe they can effectuate the change they weren't able to when they were in office.
Yeah, well, you know, there's another project. You know, there's another project. You know, this is the thing, and you know, the trouble is with all these people, they've got an army of secretaries and functionaries to protect them from people like me. You know, so you know, it's a tough job, and it needs somebody fairly dedicated to really focus on just that one thing you've suggested, Alison, and on the other thing that that Eva suggested.
When you were talking, John, about working together worldwide, I was drawn back to this book here by Jonathan Porritt, Hope and Hell, about climate, and the book is meant to be positive, but the problem is the melting of the ice in Greenland, etc. And this year, California saw a program about the fires in Siberia, and it's when, as far as I can see, it's going to happen. The melting of the ice in Greenland and the Antarctic, when that ice melts on land and goes into the water, the sea levels will rise. So Simpol is a really important organization to build an awareness worldwide, ready for the time when people say, hold on, these sea levels are rising, we've got to do something about it. So it's really important that we focus on being ready for that, to have the marketing companies to say, right, this is the solution. And I said before, I'm a technical guy. This has happened due to the optical fiber cables making worldwide communication possible. And it's that mindset. Think away from 20 years ago. Our whole world has changed due to cheap internet connections with call centers around the world. The whole thing has changed. So we need to think, right, wait for the time when we really get everyone galvanized. Say, listen, guys, this is a solution, because climate change this book is such a challenge to read, such a challenge. Hope and Hell, it's called, by Jonathan Porritt.
Yeah, I mean, you know, often people ask the question, you know, is there time enough? And of course, the answer is we don't know for sure. But, you know, if you look at, for example, climate change, whether we are too late or not, or even if we are too late, we're still going to need global cooperation to raise the sufficient funds to build the seawalls. You know, so whether you're talking about prevention or you're talking about mitigation, or whether you're talking about a sort of rearguard action, whichever way you look at it, we're going to need to cooperate as a species. Otherwise, governments are just not going to be able to raise the revenue to do any of this, you know.
Yes, Yves?
One second. So I've also been talking to Dirk Weller about this a lot the last 2 years. My girlfriend is into internet marketing, and I've watched her and coached her, getting more and more sufficient at that and successful with that. And I learned that it's very important to focus on the target audience, to focus on their needs, and to focus on a way to make them believe that we have something to offer to satisfy their needs. And I would love to work that out with a group of people who are into this way of thinking on how to market Simpol in a way that we get funding as soon as possible.
Yeah, the other, Eve, we should talk later, because Also, we have a 4-minute video, animation video, really nicely produced video, which will be coming out in the next few weeks. It's finished and it's coming out. And that would be an ideal, and it's actually narrated by the actor Mark Rylance, who's quite a well-known actor. And that, I think, could be a vehicle for, it's perfect vehicle for internet marketing. So if your girlfriend can offer us any help, that would be great. I mean, also I think that, one of our assumptions or plans or hopes is that this video, although it's aimed at citizens, it will be seen by politicians, right? And so even if citizens don't sign up in huge numbers, the politicians aren't necessarily going to know that. The politicians will still, it will still have an effect on them, because they're thinking, oh my God, my vote, my seat could depend on this. So maybe I'd better sign up sooner rather than later, before my competitors do. So we've got to go. I will show you we should be in touch afterwards and we can talk about it.
John, I think like last time when we spoke, I think we mentioned this tangentially, cryptocurrency, because every time I talk to you and we talk about this world-centric approach to global capital and policies, I always think about cryptocurrency, because it's like a way to, it's a way of global communication, so to speak. And I was wondering, how would you evaluate cryptocurrency in general? And if you would see a way cryptocurrency to be tied to Simpol, like a separate cryptocurrency that would be tied to a pledge, say, and which would rise in value the more people have that kind of currency, and to solve that kind of funding problems, because it's like
So that's a really interesting idea, Tom. I mean, I'm over 60, so I don't understand anything about crypto, anything. Okay, right. So I need you or people who have this idea to come and tell me how this could work.
Right.
But yes, I mean, in principle, I understand. I mean, I'd be very open to any ideas like that which can help us, of course. But you'll need to come and explain to me, how it can help, because I just don't know enough about cryptocurrencies.
Right. I'm not a programmer either, but as far as I understand, it just works because people are participating in it, and the more people participate, and the more effective it is. And so it just circumvents the banking system in a kind of way, and the capitalistic system. And so, and as I said, the price rises with the amount of people who participate in it. And so, and because it's like a global flow of money, so to speak, which is not regulated in that kind of sense. I always thought maybe that's the new way of the new world-centric way of deal with money, and so like a way to tie that in with Simpol, that that could be, I don't know, I'm not a programmer, but I always, when I talk to you, I always have this kind of.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you're right. I'm sure you're right, Tom. I just don't know enough about it to be able to come up with the precise way in which that could happen. So I would need people who are experts to see Simpol and come and tell us how we can do it. But
we need some hackers for sure. That's for sure.
Hey,
we need some hackers who can do that.
Yeah, we need some hackers. Yeah, absolutely. Good.
Any more questions from the audience?
Question. Hi, John. Thanks for the presentation. Very interesting. I wonder this discussion about evolution of consciousness, and one obstacle I kind of see in all this. is just the worldview of people. You're heavily weighted in an evolutionary biological perspective, which is very scientific, empiricist, etc. And people at the same time have these passionate religious, beliefs and mythologies and poetics and so there was a conversation that I watched recently between Jonathan Pajot, who's Orthodox Christian, and Brett Weinstein, Evolutionary Biology, and there seemed to be an intense impasse there. It's like one person claiming their view of the world is superior to the other, and how can you go beyond that?
What was the religious person claiming?
Well, basically, they were both claiming. Basically, Pajot was claiming that narrative is the highest form of and participation within a living narrative. Let's say biblical from his perspective is the answer to all the existential problems, and the other guy was saying no, we have to be purely empirical, and the highest thing is science. Right, science is the highest perspective, right? So we have to grow out of all our, ignorance and superstition, and so. Yeah,
I can see your point. I don't think. I think that that there are links, very strong links between the philosophy behind Simpol and a lot of the world's main religions. Mm-hmm. So do as you would be done by, the golden rule.
Golden rule, yeah.
That's Simpol. You could say also that when you see destructive global competition as a vicious circle that we're all caught in, you can stop blaming and shaming. You see that politicians are doing what they're doing because they're caught in the system, because they have to do it. They have to stay competitive. You see, you can forgive politicians. You can forgive corporate executives. They have to do what they do. Otherwise, they're going to lose profitability. So Simpol is also about forgiveness, actually. Mm-hmm. It's saying, I understand we're all caught in the system. Some of us are higher up it and others are lower down it, but we're all caught in it. And that too, I think, has a very unifying, very almost religious feel to it. Mm-hmm. So I think there are ways that gap could be bridged. I would like to think, at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Some more questions or comments? So I found it very neat how you did this with the consolidation between the left and the right spectrum, the needs of the left and right, and how one need could accommodate the satisfaction of the other side. And so it's like I find that quite interesting.
Yeah, I think that's very, very important, Tom. And it's something that I'm feeling, the more I'm watching what's happening around the world in the US, and this clash between the green meme and the green and the blue, with the clash between postmodernism and traditionalism, let's say. And I'm thinking, and they're looking for answers here at the national level. And of course, there is no solution there.
Right.
And then if they would just tilt their heads and look up to the global level at something like Simpol, I think, oh, actually, yeah, I can, then you can start to see where the reintegration can occur.
Right. I mean, it's like what Andrew said, because like if I get it right, Weinstein used a very, very modernistic worldview, which would be, orange, evolutionary, scientific, which would still be like first tier in this a model of Wilbur, and a religious person, like a I don't know, like what I don't know Pajot as good, but say if it would be like a traditional religious person, that also would be like first tier. And I think like a world-centric perspective would have the ability to, equilibrize those two, to harmonize those two, working together without them clashing too much.
Yeah. So, sorry, just before we come to Eve. Yeah. No, I think that's right, and I think often people at a traditional level, they may be religious, but they are also quite concerned about national cultural identity. So they're concerned about immigration, right? But say take a lot of Trump supporters or Brexiteers, for example, but they are also quite often quite because they are anti-globalist, they are also anti the Amazons and the Facebooks and the and the Microsofts, and so Simpol can actually bring those two things together, right?
Right.
They say, look, guys, if we cooperate, we'll have less mass migration. We'll have more, people staying much more in their home countries because they can make a decent living there quite happily. That will reduce mass migration. You'll feel more secure, and we'll tax those bloody multinationals as well. Tick, tick, tick. I know it's easy to say, but ultimately, that's got to be where the reintegration, I think, of the polarization comes in.
And there's this question of like the Zen arrow goes both ways. Like we have to become very small and to become big, right? There has to be this, if you want to scale something, you have to deal with the most intimate aspects of reality first, if that makes any sense.
I think I understand, Andrew. Yeah, you might need to expand on that at some point.
Well, I was just thinking, if it's a problem of scale, we're always trying to, let's get bigger and bigger in our perspectives. And then we leave the basic perspectives behind, which the traditionalists are sort of fighting for, is that family and like home and these kind of things.
Well, I don't know. That's a really good point, because I like to think that you will also get a reintegration of global and local. Okay, so for example, I know that's not quite the point you were making, but if you say, people who want local economies, they want thriving local economies. Well, you're only going to get that if you globally tax long distance transportation.
Sure.
If you do that, you're going to make local production and consumption everywhere much more competitive and vibrant. And so I think that there is an argument to say that global cooperation will actually feed the roots rather than sucking them dry, which is what is effectively happening now.
Yeah.
John,
I agree with that. I was just
Bill, you wanted to say something?
Sorry,
I say that the slideshow, John, and your talk was absolutely excellent as a resource. I'm a resources person. I see we're recording it tonight. Have you got in plan for someone to edit it and put it onto YouTube for Simpol?
Yep, I'm going to edit it and put it onto YouTube.
Great, thank you, Andrew. Brilliant. And
thanks, Andrew.
Please email us with a link so I can pass on to people.
Yeah, we'll obviously put it on our networks and as well.
There is already a YouTube channel with one guy, I forgot his name. He studied in Princeton. He's doing interviews with people. And I learned in one interview that I was always wondering what the word after postmodern is. And I learned that it's metamodern. And for me, that was like really hopeful, because I don't like the integralists at all anymore. I can't stand them. And I'm so sick of them. But I learned that the metamodern thing is also about transcend and include, and they even refer to Wilbur, but they are much more into politics, and they're much more like rational from my perspective, and I would like to work together with those people more.
Yeah, well, Daniel Gertz knows about Simpol, and we also have on our interview series, Simpol Insights, there's one with Emil Ejner-Fries, the other half of Hansi. So they know about us. But I was saying to Tom, actually, just before we started the broadcast, that it's sort of driving me mad, because I'm watching Rebel Wisdom and I'm watching Integral Life, and you're seeing all of these guys, whether it's Daniel Schmachtenberger or Jordan Hall, they're all talking about, what are they talking about? They're talking about something like Simpol, and yet, or they're talking about those overall aims, but and a lot of them know about Simpol. But how do we actually get people to put pen to paper and get behind this? Because there does seem to me, and I'm not saying that Simpol is the only way to do this. What I'm really saying to people is, have you got a better idea? And if not, then at least could you support us in the meantime until you have, And believe me, if someone can come up with a better idea, I'll be the first to say goodbye to Simpol and do that, So I think there needs to be, I think it would be great, actually, if people who are watching those people will say, could actually put your hands up at a meeting like this and say, look, why aren't you supporting Simpol? Because unless people at our, as an sort of integral meta-modern level of consciousness kind of get together behind something, we're fucked. We're just going to carry on separate, atomized intellectuals contemplating our belly buttons.
Yeah, no, I think that's a hugely important point. This pragmatist view on, the whole thing, that, philosophy has to find its applications, and if there aren't any applications to a theory, then the theory is useless, basically. And that's the basic gist of it. And so.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, there's what is it, eros and agape? There's a lot of eros in the integral community, but you've got to bring it. You've got to bring. There's no point ascending if you don't then use that wisdom and knowledge to help the world.
Right.
So there's a very practical thing. It's not really so esoteric.
No, yeah, especially if it seems to be working already.
That's right.
You have the proof. The proof is in the pudding.
Yeah, and I think much more now than than in the past. We really have got a significant number of politicians already signed up to this now. It is working. We know it works. We know it. Mette is our Danish national coordinator. And a few months ago, Mette, you were you weren't so sure, but now you've already got 2 MPs signed up, and you can't wait to get a few more, can you? Anyway, yeah. So that, I think this practical, this need to theory. It seems to me that the world of theory is a very safe space. It's very safe to be sitting on all of these podcasts and to be, talking very intelligently about all of this stuff. But
right.
If you don't get out into the real world and actually put it into practice, what's the point?
Right.
May I just to add to this issue? Because I attend so many webinars and Zoom conferences, and I don't even ask questions anymore. You know how they have in the chat and then the question. I just cut to the chase and I give them the answer, and I give them Simpol's website and I say, here's why, or here's what. Now, my question is, because we're talking about somehow moving from the conceptual to the actual, what is it? What might be the reason that all these people who, and I'm telling you, in every webinar that I'm attending, it's the same, it's basically the simple call. It's just remarkable and frustrating for me. So what do you think is the reason, or could we isolate what might be the psychological impediment to getting them from what they're literally talking about to signing up to the implementing the action? I'd like to know what that pebble in the shoe is, so that if we isolate that, yes, because I see.
John, you first.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a sort of, in a sense, it's part of nation centrism. And the idea also to part of nation centrism is that we citizens are the children and our politicians are the parents. And we ask our, wise parents to solve our problems for us. And so I think that's why, often I think, Alison, why, there's all these eloquent calls for global action, but nothing, people, the people who are calling for them don't feel the need to act because they still think that our parent politicians are going to do it if we just keep calling. And what they don't realize is that destructive global competition means that they can't do it. They can't, the parents can't act. We have to become the parents, in other words. That's why I made the point in the presentation, we citizens have got to get into the driving seat because, it's a bit like, we're all in this jet and it's going wildly out of control. We're all, we're sitting in economy class and the plane's going wildly out of control, and up in first class are the business people, right? And we all think the politicians are in the cockpit. And then finally someone, goes up to the cockpit, opens the door, and there's nobody in there. There's nobody in there. And then you turn around and you see the politicians are all sitting in first class too. And you look at them and they just go, what, they are lost. We think they're not the parents anymore. And I think that's why, at these conferences, there are all these sort of wonderful words spoken, but there's the kind of the subtle expectation that governments can act if only we ask them nicely enough, or if only we protest loudly enough, or if only we, do an Extinction Rebellion protest or whatever. They are not in a position to act, and that's a huge psychological transformation, and it's scary because, my God, if there's no one in the cockpit, fuck me, what do we do? But that's precisely the growing up process that we need to effect.
Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged, John. Your microphone is off.
Sorry.
Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged. You know her?
Yeah. We just had we did an interview with David Sloan Wilson, which is going to come out on Friday, about Atlas Shrugged.
Right. Yeah, because Ayn Rand, she was like a materialist, and absolutely, she had such an airtight philosophical approach to the world, and while we are saying we are all like narcissists are too egoistic, she says basically that we are not rational and egoistic enough. Because if I'm really egoistical and rational about it, then my goal would be, and my approach would be, that I have to be cooperate with you in a kind of way because that deeply affects myself. But we're not on this kind of level yet. So all our decisions are emotionally driven, and we're not really rational about it. And we're not really.
That's true, Tom. That's true. But I think that also comes back to what Eve was saying about the orange meme having perhaps more potential than the green meme, in the sense that by aligning the global, the national interest with the global common interest, you can say, well, it's in my self-interest to cooperate globally.
Right.
Right. And so I think that
maybe you should have like different websites for different stages of
There's another project, Tom. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, in a sense, that's that's true. And actually, that little slide about the left and the right that we were talking about, that's the first time I've used that actually in a presentation. But in a sense, you would want that on a website in some sense, and we do kind of allude to it. But it's very difficult to have one website that talks to six different levels,
Right.
These things are called landing pages, and that's exactly what people do with their agendas all over the internet. You make up what the needs of your target audience is, and then you make a very, very specific plan on how to get them through the stages until they buy. And this buying point can be different things for Simpol. For example, like you tried something like that tonight, John, when you said, please sign. that's actually an action point, but this could go much further. We can make up different action points, and there's a science to that, and I know that science, and I can apply that, but I can't do it on my own. We need a team, and the whole thing, from my view, is like as soon as possible we need to get funding and go on from there.
Yeah, well, let's talk about it afterwards, Eve, because maybe if we get a plan together, we can, you could maybe present your ideas to our management team, and we can then see what we can do together.
Mette, you wanted something? You wanted to say something?
I would like to go back to Alison's question, because that's really the key for me to find out how can I drive people to support Simpol. And one of the experiences I've had is I have been in conversation with two professors, one within economy, and I think the other one, it was kind of a strange combination of, I think, by agriculture and maybe also economy or something like that. And I'm not a political activist at all, so I have had to expand my courage. So I finally came to ask them, because both of them were really supportive of the idea of Simpol, and say, wow, I totally agree with you. And then finally I said, okay, if you agree so much, can you please explain to me, why don't you support Simpol then? And both of them, they said, but well, I have my own idea. I have had this idea. I want everybody to understand that if we keep the oil in the soil and we make bonds out of having the fossil fuels in the ground, then we will solve everything. We will have a new economic model to put into action. And I said, yes, but how will you do that? Your only method right now is to cry out louder and louder. Why don't you join us so that we can have supporters and we can have citizens to prioritize your idea and many other ideas, so that we can find out which idea do we want to go with. But this idea that if I only shout loud enough, and I'm deeply buried in my own idea, and I think that is the pebble in the shoe. I think that was the word you used, Alison. And actually today I were in conversation once again with one of the professors, and I said to him, hey, I don't you don't need to respond to me, but please explain to me, how will you get your idea? How will you get people or politicians to back up your idea?
Yeah, how will they implement it?
Yeah.
How can they implement it in a world where any nation that moves first is actually going to suffer?
Yes.
Yeah, and he didn't have an answer, did he?
I only wrote this to him today, but the first professor, he never responded to that. He said, other people have to do this. I'm taking care of my own idea. And he's bombarding the newspapers with articles and messages and yeah. I
mean, I think there is this sort of, there's a kind of postmodern narcissism going on where everyone has their own idea, of course, including me as well.
Yes.
But and I think it's almost inevitable, and I think this is another reason why we are focusing most strongly on getting politicians to support us, because I think that when push comes to shove, Simpol will then be the train that's leaving the station, and then everybody else will jump onto it. But at the moment, everyone's sort of got their own train, and they're all lined up in the station, and nobody wants to get on anybody else's train.
Exactly.
And this is another problem that I mean, I think Alison, a lot of the people in the conference, the recent one, that you were involved in, they've all got their own organizations and blah 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 blah, and cooperation is really difficult, actually.
Ironically, because the premise of
20 years ago, because I came from the business world, and I naively thought that the world of activism and NGOs would be cooperative and wonderful, and I was really green at that time, and then of course I very quickly found out that actually it was worse than in the bloody business world.
Yeah. Although I will say that I have been reaching out. I don't have anything conclusive yet from that group, so that's still, a maybe. But I have been reaching out a lot to the space community, which seemed to be a burgeoning, as the burgeoning new field of, as above, so below. I guess the chaos is moving upwards, and it seems ripe for, the picking. So I'm getting some interest, but again, like Meta was responding to my point, I think there is an ego. I think that must be it. There's a narcissism, yes, and an ego that isn't even being consciously addressed, but it's definitely ever present. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I think that unfortunately there's no, I've been trying for 20 years to cooperate with other organizations, and it hasn't really worked. And I think we in Simpol, we just need to focus on those politicians, because I think, they are where all the roads are going to meet in the end, because if the UN process is not working, they've got no answer there. If national action, individual action isn't working, they've got no clothes there either. And the problems are getting worse and worse and worse. So sooner or later, they are the ones who are going to have to implement or find a solution. And that's when Simpol will be there with the silver platter and the chilled 6-pack of lager,
It's already happening. The United Nations are going together with the World Economic Forum because they are running out of funding, and they are looking for solutions there too. And
you're not going to find any solutions in Davos.
No. But that was getting me thinking, like, we should work together with the orange meme and go. I would like to focus there.
Yeah, I mean, quite seriously. I mean, the book that Klaus Schwab wrote that has has triggered this, what's it called, the Great Reset, I think it's called. I mean, what he actually writes in there is actually really good, but it needs to be driven by citizens, not by the bloody World Economic Forum. And Simpol would be the perfect, well, it would be a very, very practical way of actually implementing that with citizen support and input and direction. But nobody's ever heard of us, you know, or very, very few people. Certainly not in Davos. They've never heard of us. Perhaps I should go skiing.
I think we have time for one more question or remark. So someone wants to share?
I have a question.
Sure.
Be very naive, but of all of the politicians that have signed from across the global spectrum, is there any that might be willing to more prominently support, to get out there in any kind of a, maybe an ambassador sort of?
Yeah, I mean, I think cultivating our politicians is another project. You know, it's yet an, you know, we have them signed up, and we try to engage them a bit, but they're very, very busy. Mm-hmm. And it's difficult. And I think we need, you know, we certainly need, we talked about this at our last meeting, we certainly need to develop, you know, them, you know, as almost as ambassadors, as you say, Alison. But again, it's, you know, that's something that will take time. But maybe once COVID is over and things are a little easier, hopefully we can get cracking a bit on that.
There are other possible ways too for ambassadors. For example, we could ask famous musicians, artists, something like that too. But that's still a problem that needs funding, and it all goes down to get funding as soon as possible.
Well, Eve, let's definitely have a conversation afterwards about all of this, because you're absolutely right.
All right. Okay, John, thank you very much that you took the time.
Well, thank you
for participating, and that was fantastic. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for you know, spending such a long time, and thank you for your questions and for listening. And you know, like I say, please do get involved. We really need your help. So thanks a lot, and thank you, Tom.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. So yes, thank you for all of you that you participated, and you can find upcoming events of our website. Wednesday, December 2nd, Cadell Last, we'll have the second of a 3-part series on sex, masculinity, and God. Friday, December the 4th, Andrew Sweeney and Bart have a talk with Cadell Last and Raven Connolly that will probably be very sexy. So I hope you will join us there. Thank you very much for all that you came, John. I wish you all the best. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
All right.
Cheerio, everybody.
Cheerio.